So again, welcome to our session. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our fantastic speaker this evening, Orsi Dunn. Not only is she an outstanding ESOL lecturer down in the Ayshire area, she's also on the Ecological Scotland Committee, and I consider it a great joy and a pleasure to count her as both a friend and a long-time colleague now. So Orsi is here to talk about a subject that we think is very pertinent and very relevant at the moment. And she's going to share her thoughts and experiences of creating safe places, I beg your pardon, which are trauma-sensitive spaces in our ESOL classrooms. Orsi, thank you so much for your time, and I'll hand over to you.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you so much, Pauline, and thank you very much for this opportunity. This is such an important topic, so I'm really pleased to be here. So hello and welcome. My name is Orsi Dunn, and as Pauline said, I'm an ESOL lecturer at Ayshire College. I work in Ayr and Kilmarnock. So let's have a wee look. My first question to you is a rather existential one. Why are we here? If you could just tell me in the chat box, you know, why are you interested in trauma? What are you hoping to gain from tonight's session? What context do you work in? It would be really good to have this information so I can kind of tailor the things that I say to your needs, hopefully. Okay.
Everyone's typing furiously.
Oh, very good, very good. Okay, so I'm going to click on that.
I'll read out for you. So, raise awareness of how I can support my learners in my ESOL classroom. Gain a better understanding to support our refugee ESOL learners in my sessions.
Okay. So I can see that a lot of you are also hoping for a kind of more general support on trauma. I'll try my best to kind of link back to a lot of the things that I said in my January webinar. That was a more kind of, it was more of an overview you know, of trauma, its attitudinal and kind of behavioural and cognitive impact. Today we'll focus more about space, you know, and learning spaces, but I'll continually refer to kind of generic things that we would be, you know, that could help us in our everyday practice as well. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to move on then, if we've had everybody's contribution. Lovely. Okay, so I'm just going to move my slide, and my slide's not moving, Pauline. Well, not panic. Okay.
So I can't move them.
Okay.
There we go.
Now, okay, it's working. Okay, hallelujah. So what is trauma? We'll start with a definition, okay, and we'll use SAMHSA's definition, working definition. Trauma is an event, a series of events, or set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful, threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Okay. I am not going to talk about trauma in a medical context. We are, you know, all ESOL practitioners. So I'm going to approach the topic from an educational context, and it goes without saying that we're all individuals and we all experience these things, you know, very differently. So what might apply to one learner who is trauma impacted might not apply to another learner. You know, there are so many variables. an infinite number of variables. Each individual reacts to trauma differently. Right, so what happens to students in the classroom who are impacted by trauma? Basically, a trauma experienced learner's brain can be in a constant state of stress. Okay, individuals can become hypervigilant, and that means that they're constantly on the lookout for potential signs of danger, and they're constantly assessing potential threats around them. This, of course, affects our cognitive functioning, because if the alarm bells are going off in our head, we're unable to concentrate, and we're unable to process new information, and we're unable to retain it and access new information. So this has a huge impact on our concentration, memory, learning. Yeah, and so I'm sure you've all heard about trauma triggers. Basically, triggers can produce kind of fear alarm reactions, which in turn produce marked physiological and behavioural changes. So a lot of trauma impacted students tend to be hypervigilant, and that means they're constantly assessing the room, and the hypervigilant brain basically discards all non-essential information. So they're only concentrating on what is important in terms of survival, rather than what is actually happening in the room. So this will come as no surprise that this has a tremendous impact on education, and it can result in lower attainment, lower assessment scores, low motivation, higher dropout rates for trauma experienced learners. Their brain basically functions in a way that makes intaking new information, learning in essence, and processing that new information really, really challenging. Okay, so I don't know if any of you have heard of Bruce Perry. He is a fantastic researcher, and he is prolific. He's written lots of different books and articles as well. At the end, the last slide that I have has my references. So if you have 10 minutes, this article where he talks about fear in adult education, it's a really, really good overview of trauma. I really recommend it. And in this article, he talks about this cycle of optimal learning that starts with curiosity, and how curiosity leads to exploration, and then in turn, we will turn to discovery, and then practice what we've learned, and then we finally reach mastery, and then again that mastery will promote further curiosity. So the problem here is that if a learner is in a constant state of fear, fear will kill off curiosity. Okay, they're experiencing trauma experienced students might be experiencing constant low-level fear, that kind of low simmering fear that will, of course, result in anxiety. So if we have learners in the class whose alarm bells are going off, curiosity will just not be there, and learning will be blocked. Perry says that when we feel safe, we crave novelty, we want new things. When we feel threatened, we turn to familiarity. Yeah, so this is why trauma-sensitive pedagogy recommends that, or literature recommends that we have that predictability is one of the things that we need to have in our toolkit as trauma-sensitive practitioners. Predictability and carefully managed change, because of that low-level anxiety and fear that students are exposed to. And in fact, if you think about learning in general, when you learn a new thing, you feel uncomfortable. You know, there's a sense of discomfort in any type of learning of a new thing. So this can be particularly challenging to trauma-impacted learners, okay? So when it comes to triggers, we often talk about triggers in terms of the kind of behavioral triggers and topical triggers and so on, but it really helps us to look at a learner's trauma responses in terms of Minahan's fizzy drink metaphor. Jessica Minahan says that if we contextualize a learner's responses, if we don't take all of the things that happen in the classroom personally, but we kind of expect the unexpected, we'll be able to deal with our learners' trauma responses more effectively. So basically, if you think of a trauma experienced learner, you know, in terms of a fizzy drink, we don't know how many times the drink has been shaken before. We don't quite know, we can't have a knowledge of that because you can't see inside the tin. You don't know how many times it's been shaken. You don't know what it is that shakes it actually. All you see is just the explosion, yeah, that happens to be, you know, that happens to happen when you're around. So if we think about our trauma sensitive strategies, not just in terms of, you know, how we behave and what content we have in our materials and, you know, what our attitudes are, but actually what our physical environment is like, that could, you know, that could significantly reduce our learners' trauma responses. So we have to kind of re-examine our physical environment using our trauma lens. And it is really important for us to recognise the link between the physical environment and their psychological state. The best starting point is always the learner. So one of the things that you can do, for example, to start with, is to ask your learners in the classroom that you're working in, you know, what do you think of this place, of this space? How do you feel in this room? How does the room make you feel? What do you like about the room? What do you not like about the room? You'd be surprised. Well, no, you won't be. You work in ESOL, so you'll know that your students will give you a very honest answer. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is a room, okay, where I spend 3 hours in every Tuesday. Okay, I have an ESOL class in this room, and just hit me. Okay, don't be shy. Tell me what you think about this room. Would you call this room a trauma-sensitive environment, a trauma-sensitive learning environment? What's wrong with the room? And you can use the chat box, or you can just speak to me, you know, whatever suits your temperament.
I teach in a room like that too. And I just don't like it. And students don't like it. They immediately seek to sit closer together. And this room stops it. So we do have like a table in the middle where they can sit, and I move the computers from it.
Yeah, okay.
Probably shouldn't really do it, but yeah.
No, but it's great that you have that flexibility. That's really good.
But it's very clinical, someone said it. Yeah, you would sit with your backs towards each other, so you don't know what to expect when you hear sounds and noises.
Absolutely, that's spot on. Yes, yeah. They're all facing the walls with their backs to the centre. Impersonal, cold, stark, sterile, impersonal, yeah. Technology dominant, clinical, yeah, okay. Not a lot of space to move about. It needs plants, yes, Kasia, okay, brilliant. Have you seen my slides, Kasia? Okay. Can you change the position of the tables and the chairs? Bring posters, some pictures. Yes, okay. Yes, so basically everything you're saying is spot on. Students are with their backs to the door, which is a major, major trigger, potential trigger for a trauma experienced learner. Trauma experienced students want to know who's coming and going, what's happening around them. So we need to be very conscious of, you know, the positioning of students in the room. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to talk you through potential stressors here, and okay. So yeah, we need to do everything in our power to remove potential stressors. However, some of it we have control over, and other stuff we don't, and we need to be, you know, very, very conscious of that. Some things are very difficult for us to change. However, having this knowledge of what needs changed can be powerful in itself. So I think it was Kasia that mentioned the positioning of the furniture. Yeah, how students need clear sight lines. So trying to get the furniture to be rearranged, speaking to sympathetic managers, and, you know, trying to go further up the food chain would be certainly worthwhile, because surely, knowing what we know about trauma impacted learners, we don't want to, you know, impose this environment on them. Overhanging, in fact, before I talk about overhanging objects, the positioning of the furniture can be quite crucial. Those of you who are lucky enough to have flexible furniture arrangement, I would say you are very lucky, because it gives your students choice, and choice is one of the aspects of trauma-informed practice that researchers highlight. Students having a say, students having control over what happens to them in the classroom in every sense can be hugely important to the process of their healing. Okay, so even if you have a flexible classroom, if you know, ask the students first thing, is everybody happy with where they're sitting? Is everybody okay with how the room is, you know, how the tables are arranged? You can just make that part of your kind of initial engagement with the students, and use the first 2 minutes of the class to rearrange the space if they wish to do so. Okay. Another thing that surprised me when I researched this topic was overhanging objects. Okay. That can be quite intimidating for a trauma experienced learner, as well as visual clutter and visual complexity. So it's a kind of double-edged sword, isn't it? Because it's wonderful to have learners work in the classroom, and it gives them a sense of belonging, which is again a major contributor to students' well-being and the healing of trauma-impacted learners. But we need to be careful, because visual complexity can be quite overpowering, and so visual clutter can be kind of detrimental to the students' sense of well-being. We need to find a balance. Re-examining art in the room, using that trauma lens again. Certain images, certain things can have symbolic significance to learners. But again, if you go back to the initial suggestion of, for example, the learners being asked, what do you like about this room? Which pictures or posters make you feel good? Which posters make you feel uncomfortable or stressed or anxious? You know, that can be a really good kind of starting point with learners. And yes, the spatial layout, emphasizing choice and so on, different seats. But even you can ask the students to try out different seating arrangements, you know, sit in different places and spaces in the room, and get them to tell you how sitting there makes them feel. Colours, you made a reference to colours, how the room looked clinical. Yeah, and research does say that wall colours have a particularly big impact on students. And according to research, white, beige and grey in particular has this sense of kind of institutional, you know, kind of lack of personal engagement and a kind of institutional feel to it. And warm colours such as red, yellow and orange tend to create quite a bit of tension and anxiety in our learners, whereas the kind of cooler, lighter shades of cool colours seem to inspire calm and reduce stress. So yeah, if you have the chance to influence what colour the rooms are painted, you know, please feel free to share what you've learned today with people who are responsible for maintaining, you know, the building that you work in. Light, again, the lighting of a room can be particularly important. Fluorescent lights, surprise, surprise, is not conducive to our well-being, and the Valhalla is adjustable LED lighting. Okay, so if Santa asks what you want for Christmas for the classroom, that would be it. And of course, natural light. Research says that you know, the more daylight students get in the room, the better they perform. They've actually measured that, and you know, let's try and have as much natural light as we can in the room, even if it's just, you know, if you go back to the previous slide, you know, where you saw the room that I showed you, it had 3 massive windows. It's just people just tend to keep the blinds shut for whatever reason. So the first thing I do whenever I enter that room is pull the blinds up. Yeah. Noise is another interesting factor that can also have an impact on students' well-being. Not just loud noises, but a kind of, you know, kind of lower, consistent noises like a humming, you know, like a humming light, a fluorescent light that keeps flickering and making noise at the same time. It can be a real strong trigger for some trauma-impacted learners. Sudden noises. If you do a wee audit of all the things that you do in the class that make a sudden noise, like for me, it was joining my laptop to the board, to the smart board. Every time I do it, or every time I did it, and there would be, you know, a wee kind of celebrity tinky noise, you know, like ding. But if my laptop was, you know, if my laptop was on full volume before that, and the smart board was, you know, on maximum volume as well, the noise that that this created was actually quite unsettling, and you know, could be a trigger for trauma experienced students. And somebody wrote, bring a plant into the classroom. Absolutely. Nature in the classroom is a wonderful opportunity, because the way we relate to nature, the way we respond to nature as human beings, gives us a fantastic opportunity to create a better space for our learners' well-being. And the magic word here is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, is biophilia. Okay, so biophilia is the term for our kind of instinctive connection, our innate connection with nature. Okay, our closeness to nature has a huge impact on our mental health and well-being, and this basically means any living thing. So your idea of a plant, bringing a plant in, is absolute genius. Yes, that can have a huge impact on students in the room. We seem to have a genetically predetermined preference, so it's a kind of a result of evolution. you know, for anything connected to nature. And restorative environments seem to have vast cognitive benefits. Now, what we call a restorative environment is a place basically that allows people to connect with nature. Some places are more successful than others at doing so, but these restorative environments have vast cognitive benefits. Increased attention span, concentration, less mental fatigue. So research has discovered fantastic things, because even, I mean, they've done loads of studies and they've discovered that you don't actually have to be in nature to benefit from you know, the positive impact of nature. It is enough to watch a film about nature for 10 minutes, or to look at a picture, okay, a poster on the wall, to have more ability to concentrate, have less mental fatigue. And it is just amazing how it boosts mood, okay, and even self-esteem, this visual connection with nature. And okay, we might not have the budget to get the room, you know, the walls painted light green, but we will be able to stretch as far as getting a picture, you know, a poster of something that will, you know, that allows our students to connect with nature. Okay, so if you look at this plant, okay, this is the first thing that I did in that horror of a room. Okay, I brought in this, and yeah, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Karen Treisman's work. She wrote a wonderful book on relational and developmental trauma, and she talks about teachers and educators' role there. Well, a lot of affection, and she basically calls educators inspirational hope-coated glue. Yeah, I love that. I love that magical term. But funnily enough, when I took that plant into the room, into the classroom, this plant, this monstera, turned out to be the inspirational hope-coated glue, okay, in the room. It gelled a whole learning community together. It didn't just engage my students. I mean, they were delighted, they loved the plant, but it also connected me with other colleagues who also used the room. Okay, the conversations that we had on the back of this one plant was fantastic. The will to change the room, it was just amazing. Now my colleagues are all, you know, all on our side. They want to help. In fact, they have had ideas about what we can do about the room. I also teach core skills, and some of my core skills colleagues use that room as well. So, I mean, nobody really has any kind of ownership of the room, yeah? But this one plant actually inspired not just staff members, but students to have ownership of the room too. So, funnily enough, the class that came in after us was a health and social care class. They were coming in to get their core skills class, and they were all commenting on the plant. One of them told me that I need to actually, like, the plant's beautiful, they said, they were really nice, but I need to stake the plant, yeah? I didn't know that poor monstera is kind of falling over. So this health and social care student actually just on her own said, oh, I'll bring in some stakes for you tomorrow, and I'll tie up the plant for you. And of course, I was explaining why the plant is in the room. You know, they totally got why the room needed changed. And I explained, you know, that some of the learners that I work with actually live in hotels, and this, you know, this is the environment that they, you know, that they come into once they leave their hotel rooms. You know, so it's really unfortunate. And it was fantastic because the health and social care students said, oh, we've got plans, we can bring some stuff in. You know, so it is, the plant itself on its own changed so much in that room, relationally and, you know, and physically as well. Okay, so time for a quiz. What I would like you to do is tell me what you think. So according to visual preference research, what type of images of nature do we prefer to look at? What do you think? What is it? What kind of things do we like to look at? So if we get a wee poster, what kind of posters should we get for our room? And just feel free, you know, fire things into the chat box and let's see. Okay, well, you're fast. The sea, sunsets, okay, water, yeah. Animals, okay, sunrises, waterfalls, seascapes, green landscapes, landscapes, okay. Forest. Okay. Scotland, yes. Any picture of Scotland is always a treat, absolutely. Okay, so if you're all done on making your guesses, growing, caring, water, trees, birds, clear skies. Okay. So if we're done guessing, here we go. This is what, oh, it always does that. Okay. There we go. Okay. So apparently, and this is called visual preference research, okay? Apparently what we prefer is, or are scenes that include copses of shaded trees, flowering plants, calm, non-threatening animals, and indications of human habitation, and bodies of clean water. Okay, so if you're doing, you know, if you're using presentation slides, for example, including the picture of the odd penguin or kitten on the slide will serve you well. Okay, having just wee images on your handouts, you know, including these images, these calming images on your handouts could be something that you could do as well, you know, when you're preparing materials. Okay. So I would like to move on now to this. Are you all ready? Hang on to your seats. Put your seatbelts on, because if you didn't like the room, this will shock you, okay? Right, in fact, no. This is a false summit, okay? I thought it was a different slide, never mind. Sorry, it's late. Okay, now, yeah, so let's have a quick discussion before I shock you again. I will shock you again, I promise, okay? This is not, I will shock you at some stage. But before we move on to that, I would like to have a quick discussion on what you feel your opportunities and limitations are in the classroom as a physical space, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing just now, if that's okay. And I would just like to have a quick chat. Oh, there are so many of you. That's lovely. Okay. So I would just like to have a quick chat about what you think. What can you do, you know, to your learning environment? Can you make any changes? Do you need to make any changes? Or do you seem to have the perfect room, the ideal classroom?
I suppose it depends on how much you're allowed to do in your workplace, first of all, because you know, in terms of wall colour, that might be dictated to by your college. Therefore, you might not, but as you said, you could always have a discussion about it further up the food chain. But it also depends on what you're allowed to put on walls or not on walls. Do you have notice boards? Are you allowed to use the notice boards? Can each class have their own notice board? There's all of those kinds of discussions. And then I suppose if you have a space that you're allowed to use or add to, then the world's your oyster, surely, possibly.
Okay, yeah, what you're allowed to do is a significant aspect of our activities in the classroom. Yeah, anybody?
I can share that I teach in the worst possible classroom, probably. There's a buzzer that I have to attend to that goes off every 30 seconds at the beginning of the class for at least 20 minutes. And we are in it's not an actual classroom, it's in a hall, I would say. It's like a big open space with the reception area and it's like a corridor that people pass through quite regularly. There's a lot of clutter. There is some natural light and it's warm, so that's the plus side.
Yeah.
But I can't really do anything about those things. There are plants, that's a plus as well. So maybe it's not all that bad. But my attitude has just been, you know, we're just going to get on with it. And I think we're managing, you know, the students are very helpful. Sometimes they'll do the buzzer. They are very patient, you know. It must be really bad for them, but we just turned it into a big joke, basically. And but it's far from ideal, but it is what it is at the moment. And we are hoping to move to new premises, so there is this air of temporality around it, but who knows what's going to happen. So the clutter is the worst for me. I just had to block it out.
Are you able to?
It affects me a lot.
Yeah, are you able to do anything about that? Is that I take it that's somebody else's clutter?
No, it's the place's clutter. So no, I can't do anything about it. I think it would be frowned upon if I did. It would be probably, I have the impression it would be seen as nosy or like trying to be too controlling or so it's kind of, it's there to stay. But we're doing fine, you know. I'm surprised how well it works, actually. But it's great to hear, like, I know a lot of this, but it's like, I can't really. But I like the idea a lot about introducing these calming elements onto my material. I really like that, so I'm going to do that, definitely.
So in a sense, it was reassuring for you to see that horrible room.
I think we've all taught in rooms like that, just some personal hell. Sometimes without any windows as well. So
I mean, sometimes, you know, sometimes it can be really useful to ask the students, you know, what do you think I could do to make this space okay for you? You know, and also I think what you said about they seem happy, they seem engaged and helpful, and we laugh about it. So obviously you can balance a lot of things out with sheer warmth and, you know, your personality, the engaging personality that you have and the investment that you make in their own learning. And it seems that you're doing all of that and more. Okay.
Hannah has her hand up, I think.
Yeah. I was just going to say that I think that's maybe quite a common problem, because a lot of ESOL classes in the community are in community centres or spaces that were not set up to be learning spaces. And as a tutor, you're in there for 2 hours a week, that's it. And it's used by so many other people. So there are kind of limitations on what you can do. But I suppose if you're able to rearrange the tables at least into a more kind of welcoming, inclusive space, then you can and just be yourself, the sort of point of welcoming. Just recognizing a lot of places that I've taught in what Kasia was saying, and it's quite difficult when you You know, it's a shared space, shared by the whole community, by loads of people, and you're only in there for a very short space of time.
Yeah, and then you're on to the next place where you face similar problems.
Yes.
And having the energy, just the sheer energy to address these issues. Yeah, so much asked of us. There's so many other aspects of our work that require attention and energy. I'm very, very mindful of how restricted we are, you know, in so many things that I'm talking about today. But then I think even the awareness, you know, having an awareness of what the space, how it can impact people's behaviour and experiences. I think even having an awareness of that can sometimes help.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, is it okay if we move on? Because I'm conscious of the time and I really want to shock you. I promise shock and I'm delivering shock. Okay, so where am I? Okay, here we go. Oh, okay, so I need to, okay, from current slide. Let's do it, okay. Just give me a moment. Okay, so we had the discussion. Right, so here's the shock, okay? Have a look at this and tell me what you think. Okay, don't hold back. This is an actual sign, okay? That's still out, still on a door. Not in my department, but it is, however, on display. Ooh, chat box, okay. Yeah, that's good, Kasha, yeah. Hopefully most students don't actually read it. Yes, fingers crossed. Scary, not welcoming, intimidating. Yeah.
Sort of reminds you of this balance when you were a child and the teacher was the god at school and you couldn't really, you know, you were not allowed to do anything unless you were told you could do something.
Yeah, a very clear power struggle there, isn't there? A very, very strong whiff of kind of conflict. Yeah. Yeah, so basically this points at a power struggle between staff and students. Okay, strong comment on the staff, absolutely. And would you believe it? This is signed. Okay, so I took the picture in a way that leaves the person who wrote this sign signed their name and their position in the organization. Really, really, really interesting. Yeah, I mean, if you are a trauma experienced person, part of the horrific experience of the trauma and the narrative that surrounds it is that at some point you had no control. Okay, that you experienced loss of agency, loss of ownership. And I think this science is a straight, you know, it takes you straight back to that point when you have very, very little influence and very little control. It does remind you of vulnerabilities, and it does further feelings of oppression. It does other the students, you know. So an image like that can be really significant in terms of kind of impact, having a negative impact on students' success and well-being. Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, so okay, so signage basically in a building or in a room can be particularly important to us. Okay, there are ecological approaches to trauma, where researchers say that basically it takes a whole village to, you know, to raise a child or something along those lines, that it's not enough for the practitioner to be trauma sensitive. We need everybody in that organization to be trauma informed and trauma sensitive. We cannot do it on our own, no matter how hard we try. So basically, educating those around us is significant. Okay, and that's why I'm always saying, send it up, you know, inform, educate peers as well. We basically need to have all aspects of our education in order, you know, like environmental, structural and attitudinal aspects of education should be part of a trauma sensitive ecosystem. And so if you look at signage, yeah, you need to take this holistic view and think about things like, are the directions to exits clear and available? Okay, that can be really, really important to a trauma experienced learner. Are exits easily accessible? It isn't just, you know, can the learner see the door and do they know how to get to the door? For example, if somebody's coming in to see you and they're coming in for the first time and they're coming in for an initial interview, if you're taking them to a kind of hidden corner of a corridor, you know, that might not be the best idea. That might put them on edge if they don't know how they're going to be able to make their way back to where they came from. Are visual materials and signs welcoming? Okay, have an audit, have a sign audit. I do believe in kind of positive vandalism, love heart sticker. I've done that before. It's just see a sign that has the wrong tone, that speaks to students as if they were other. I put a wee love heart on it, just for kicks. Who would punish me for that? Really? And if they do, they'll just have to learn about trauma sensitive signage. Okay, and this signage clear and legible. But yeah, I do believe in us being an instrument, you know, instruments of change. Oh, yes, so I don't know who works in buildings like this. Is there anybody who works in a fancy big college? Have you ever thought about this beautiful asset? Because it is a beautiful asset to the community, and the community will be quite rightly proud of the building, you know, as I am. But sometimes we need to realize that these spaces don't really cater for everyone. And it's not just our ESOL learners, but it could be anybody, any trauma experienced student or staff member who uses the building regularly. So this photo was taken from the entrance of the building. Look at the big overhanging objects. Look at the distance from the door to reception. You know, it's at least 30 meters, 30, 40 meters. That can be a significant journey for a student who was impacted by trauma. So look at this. This is the view from the 3rd floor. You come out of the lift and this is what you see. Staff members struggle with this view as well. And you can see here how when the building was designed, you know, big overhanging objects, and then you have those spaces down below where you could sit. Yeah, but there is no privacy. There's no nooks and crannies. There's nowhere you can go to get some kind of relief from the building. I think we need to be really, really, really mindful of that. You know, at community consultations, or even when, you know, they give us a room, I now fight every room on the 3rd floor because it's difficult for my learners to come out of the lift and see this. Yeah, so our big, beautiful buildings can be a very, very intimidating place or space for trauma impacted learners. Okay. Okay, so now that I think I'm hoping that I haven't depressed you too much. Yeah, I mean, I do want to leave things on a positive note because, you know, you are a tremendous resource to your students. Everything you learn and everything you do for them is an opportunity for change. You know, every interaction, every positive interaction that you have with your students is an opportunity for change. You need 7 minutes of empathetic connection to repair a damaged neurological pathway. Okay, or you need to provide the opportunity for that as well with group work. So you're already doing a lot to you know, to help students in their healing. But all of that comes at a price. Okay, Van Newland gave a lecture on teachers' values, and she found that care, solidarity, pedagogical excellence, liberal democracy, integrity, and reliability were the clear, the kind of core values for educators. Now, I want to focus on care and solidarity, because care and solidarity takes an awful toll on us. Okay, it really does come with a price. We do get tired. There's an awful amount of emotional labor attached to care and solidarity. So we are very compassionate as educators, but there is a difference between, we need to be mindful of the difference between compassion and over-identification, because it can lead to secondary trauma, okay, or burnout. We are particularly, people who work with trauma-experienced people are particularly vulnerable to secondary trauma and burnout. So I want to focus on something that I've read not so long ago. It was written by Jen Alexander, who wrote a lovely book on teacher well-being, and this sentence really grabbed me, because of how true it is. You know, it just basically describes my current situation. We must realize that will always be more asked of us in this line of work than what we can realistically accomplish, and as such we must establish boundaries around what we can and cannot do. Yeah, so we need to look after each other and after ourselves, because we simply cannot pour from an empty cup. So I always say that at the end of every session that I deliver on trauma, is that you know, you and your well-being is very important. You need to look after yourselves, and for example, this can be something that you can do with your students, and of course, as you do it with your students, you need to do one for yourself. Okay, the Olga Phoenix self-care wheel. So you just Google it. You know, you'll be able to find more information on this, but you can get your students to collect all the things that make them happy in a physical sense, what makes them happy emotionally, spiritually, personally, professionally, yes, psychologically. Make sure you do one for yourself. Okay, and then set your challenge. So you do one for yourself as well, and then the following week, you look back and see how much of it you've done this week or the past week. And if you've not done enough, big slap on the wrist. Okay? And you do more the following week. Okay. And I promised you that I would have a slide with my references. So if you fancy reading into any of this, just do a screenshot, and it's also an eye test because it's very small. Sorry, I didn't want to do 2 slides. Okay, so these were the articles and books that this session was based on today. Okie dokie. Is it okay if I remove the slide? I'll stop sharing so I can see your lovely faces. This is terrible, you know, speaking into the dark. I don't see faces. I never know how it's going down.
Now, there are a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions or comments for Orsi, please put up your hands or unmute yourself and shout out. Maybe there's no questions. I have no hands, Orsi. Ah, Kevin.
Just one question. It was about, we talked about trying to create a nice space and moving things around. Was there other senses involved in trauma that we should maybe address? I was thinking specifically about things like smell. I know it sounds odd, but one of the classrooms I use, we go in the day after a yoga class has been held, where they use incense. So we actually go into a really nice smelling space. It's not the nicest space, but I just wondered if there's been any research on that, or was there other things other than the visual that we should look at?
Yeah, they did there's all sorts of kind of environmental aspects. So there was smell, there was temperature, you know, if the room's too cold, if the room's too hot, fresh air, apparently, you know, and the lack of fresh air has a physiological and then a cognitive impact as well. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's so cruel, isn't it? Because see, if you think of the tin, of the, you know, of the can, anything can shake it, anything can impact on it, and we have, you know, very little knowledge of what can impact the student negatively, and then we have limited impact on what we can change in the environment for the students. Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. Is there questions from anybody else? There's lots of really lovely positive comments in the chat box for you to read.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
If there's no more questions or comments, then I'll tie up the session with a minute to spare. Thank you so much. Huge thank you to Orsi for a really, for me, very inspiring session this evening. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for joining us on a Monday evening. As I said, this is our last online forum for 2022. Keep your eyes peeled for Natecla's 2023 programme. It's coming to you hot from the press pretty soon. And we hope to see you at something with us next year. But in the meantime, take care. Thank you very much, everybody. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.